Okay, so this is a 50-50 question. Finances. What's your take on splitting the bills when you're married?
Well, like when we first started talking, like I very much shared like the like we have to split the bills, like we have to split the financial situation has to be shared. Um,
Do you remember what I told you? What my response was to that? Because I remember we were sitting in the living room and we were sitting on your couch when I asked you that question. Do you remember what I told you?
I vaguely remember. I remember you stating something about basically like along the lines like if you're gonna be splitting the work and splitting the bills, like if you were basically going to be doing half of the man's job, you weren't going to be 100% of the wife.
You give me 50% of a husband, I give you 50% of a wife. Half a husband, half a wife. Yeah.
Which, as time has gone on, and then our situation has changed, and I did end up in our situation taking over uh, all of the financials and the bills and stuff like that. Like we were no longer splitting that, and then I think I think it's easier these days for people to want to do that
Yeah.
simply because of the cost of everything. I feel like in some households it's not even optional whether you're splitting 50-50 or like it's mandatory. Like we both have to work, like we both have to contribute to this household so that we can make it. And I think a lot of that um is like I said, just the cost of everything, and just the cost of day-to-day life, as well as salaries not matching it. Because even when we made that first transition to when I was taking over 100% of the financials, like in our relationship, and 100% of the the financial burden and the bills and stuff like that, it I was working a job where I was making pushing six figures a year. Like I was being paid like almost $40 an hour is what I was making when I left that job.
I think it was like 38
It
something.
was like
Yeah.
$38.67 an hour. Like is yeah, that was my hourly. And then I was like, there was overtime here and there, which was slowly taken back. But the point being is, I was not making not like I wasn't making a small paycheck compared to some. Like I had a pretty well paying job, and then even then when we made that transition, it became very quickly like, oh, like the financials are becoming upside down. Like there's more going out than that's coming in, and like and again, like on that type of salary, on that type of hourly, like that didn't happen before.
Well,
And
maybe
I
you were
think
only
that's,
worried about your bills.
well, I'm saying even far before, when things were more traditional,
Oh,
like going even back to like like 40s 50s, when the wife did stay at home, and that was her duty, was the household, and the man, it was his duty to go out and hold down the job and bring, be the breadwinner. And you could do that on just a man's salary. You could buy a house, you could buy a couple cars, like you could do all these things and still live like a frugal like life. Like you may have not been like over the top rich, but you could live a pretty frugal life on the man's salary. And I think that's why things have gone to where they are now, where it's like, no, we have to split things. And it's because of the cost situation, and the fact that salaries have not matched the increase in what it costs to live. Like we here don't live in a big fancy house, we don't drive big fancy cars. Like You know, you drive a Toyota Tacoma. I was driving like a 2012 Chevy Tahoe. Like they weren't over the top expensive cars. Like
Yeah.
and yet and again, and we're not living in this huge mansion either. Like and yet still on a pretty well paying salary, but only one salary, the bills and stuff and all of that was getting tight here. Like it so I understand why many have migrated to that thought process, you know, whether it's you know like a change in mindset, like a more modern mindset of a man of like no, we're splitting the bills versus the traditional man of well, I'm the breadwinner, you know, the woman stays and takes care of the house. um you know, is it so much of mindset shift, or is it just because we've been all around, just the families have been put in financial situations that don't enable, you know, to live on just one income?
Do you think if maybe it wasn't like that, that men these days would take on being the breadwinner more often?
You know, that's an interesting thing to.
Because I'm playing devil's advocate here because you're saying that the reason why it is the way that it is because of our economy, and that's why I guess the quote unquote modern man, you know, requires his wife to work is because it takes two incomes. Now, if our economy was better, do you think that would change the mindset of men?
I think it would make it certainly easier. I think that there men by design, I feel like by how how just basic humans are programmed, you know, like the man is the provider. Like the man leaves the cave, the man, you know, goes and hunts the deer and brings the deer back to the cave. Like, and so I think that's built into the programming. Like that still exists, it's just suppressed. And I feel like there's a lot of things evolutionary that have been like suppressed just because of the way we're able to live. So I think men would still step up and crave that. I mean, I'm not going to paint the entire board and say that yes, all men would become providers.
There's
If
no absolute.
there is no, there's never an absolute. There would still be people that have no drive and don't want to, you know, get up and go and do that. But I think you would see more if the financial situation just around the country was different. You know, if inflation hadn't, just like I said, just continued to creep and salaries did not match that creep, and now I think we're in a situation where a lot of families and couples do have to split.
I don't know. I think maybe there's definite from a woman's perspective. There's definitely it is a very very common thing that either men don't want to work, they don't want it, they choose not to financially support a woman. And there's coming again from a woman's perspective. I've heard a lot of women's stories. I have my own stories about when you go out on a first date. There are some men that want to split the bill and because they've you have a lot of men that were once very good men. And I think maybe it's always that good man that gets taken advantage of one too many times. And then they have this bitter taste in their mouth and then they no longer want to provide. They feel taken advantage of. From what I've seen and the stories that I've heard, there's a lot of women that have bitter taste in their mouth when it comes to that. And they just, They look at it. There's so many women that operate independently. When you met me, I was operating independently. You know, I myself, I bought this house myself. I have 2 cars in the driveway. I have savings in my account. You know, I myself was making right over $40 an hour. Like, I was living comfortably. But I tend to not live above my means either. But 100% I was taken care of. But because I did it all.
Right.
And there's a lot of women that do that. And then once they do that, it's so hard to flip that script. Like, as for me, and I'm sure there are some women that they don't realize it, but for me, it was very hard for me to give up that head of household. It's a very scary thing when you've been disappointed and let down so many times, when a man has been given the opportunity to take head of household and then disappoints you. You know, so and I'm sure that there's a lot of women that can relate to that, and that's why it's just fuck it, I'll do it myself. Because so long as is you're doing it, as you've been figuring out in the last year, that sometimes you can only depend on yourself. You can't trust another person. You can't trust employers. You can't, like, you have to make sure it gets done.
Yeah. You know, and I, I, I guess you could make that argument too, that same way that you had said, men get burned and then turned in, that they were good men, but then they get taken advantage of, and then they become that guy that, they show up to the first date and they want to split the bill.
Yeah.
And then I feel like some of that, with women may be driven by the same thing. Like, you can only be disappointed so many times and let down so many times before you're just like, you know what, I'll pick up the torch. Like, I'll do it myself. I'll
Yeah.
leave the cave and get the deer. And then you do that yourself, and you find out, like, so I can support myself. Like, I can do this. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, then it just becomes like this, a very tough thing to let go, because it's also a level of control, and
Yes.
that I like you tied it to, how I've been figuring out, like, this last year, like, even with employers, like, nobody will take care of you and your own like you.
Right.
And so the same debacle that I've been having with employers, and the drive to go out and be self-employed is the same drive that drives women to, well, I'll just go out and do it myself.
Yeah.
Because there are guys that, that maybe they're not truly ready to step up, or they're not willing to step up, but whatever the reason may be, they don't, and then it just disappoints all the way around.
There's some guys that want to be taken care of.
And there is some of that going around too. I mean, like I said, I feel like reverting back to what I talked about, or
Like,
what.
financially, I mean. But you
Yes,
know what I mean.
yes. Like what we had said earlier, I can't 100% say that if it was easier financially, like, I feel like we would see a resurgence of more, traditional male breadwinner. The man goes out and has the job and holds the fort down, if it were, financially, you know, enabling to do so. But as we even said before, that's not 100%. Like, you're still going to have the guys that don't want to. It's the it's a person of, I'm choosing the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and well, I mean, if you look at it from the flip side, so from on the woman's end, like, there are some women, and I don't know if it's in denial. I don't know if it true, like, because again, there's never no absolute. There's never an absolute, right? So you're gonna have some women that truly do want to be by themselves, that do not want to, or even if they're not by themselves, they want to have their own thing, no matter what, right? And and then you have some. So from the guy's perspective, I hear women, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to cook. They don't want to do. They just don't. You know how they make that joke on social media about like men want to date their mom or men want to date their grandma about how they used to operate back in the day and they took care of the man and made the lunch and did
Right.
all of that, right? And then there are some women that don't know how to cook.
Yeah,
That
and because I do think that goes both ways because you know, if you want to talk about more traditional roles, it's not just on the man. Like it wasn't, you know, tradition wasn't just about, well, the man pays the bills and gets the job, and you know there were two sides to that. So the man, yes, went and paid the bills and had the job, and if you want to go back to more traditional roles, then that also means that as the woman, like, you know, you were more, you know, head of the the household part of things. Like you it was more of the house chores and taking care of the kids and doing things, you know, things that needed to be done like at the house. Like, and it's it's not un it like they're equal in importance. I feel like there's also like this like stigma of like if I'm stay at home, I'm not as good, or like I'm the sidekick, or I feel like there's this stigma to it that if you are staying at home, that that somehow you're not contributing,
like
and
you're
that
less valuable.
and you're less, yeah, like you're less valuable, and that's I think the people I don't know where that comes from because it financially you may not be contributing, but there's still so many things to contribute that, you know, tie into that traditional role. So women that don't do that, circling back to what you were talking about, like women that don't do that, like they want their man to be the traditional man, and well, you go out, you get the job, you pay the bills, and you take care of me. But that also means you have a part in that that is of equal importance. So if I am the as the man, I'm out, I'm working, I'm making the money, like, and you're just home, like that means like again, there are still things at the household of equal importance that need to be done. Just because it doesn't bring any monetary value to the household, who wants to live in a house, you know, littered with dirty laundry and dirty dishes, and you know, all just the house is in disarray. You know, nothing is kept. Like it's like nobody wants to do that, but you know, they have to be done by somebody, and so it's the person that is doing them isn't bringing less value. They're just bringing value in a different way. It isn't a dollar bill coming to the household, but it's things are picked up, things are nice, like all the other things that go into making like a functioning household. The kids are fed, the kids are off to school, like you know, the groceries, we've gone and we've gotten the groceries, like I mean, that alone is like, because I don't want to do it. I mean, that's one of those things. Like, I work, like I work all week, and then like I might get, you know, that one solid day off a week, and then it's like I'm not trying to take 2 3 hours out of my day to go to the grocery store. Like I don't want to do that. It's like I only have this day of the week off, and like I'm going to spend three of it sifting through aisles and getting groceries, and it's just like you know, it's almost one of those things where like they say time is money. So you know, I'm out, I'm doing the work, and then you are in the position now where you have taken on the traditional role of the woman, and you do the house chores, and you do it, and so you go and make that grocery trip, that 3 hours, that has value to me. Like that is an accomplished task that I didn't have to do. Like it you still supply value.
I know when I first started staying at home, and you can probably attest to this, it was very, very hard. It took months for me to decompress. So I'm on like 3 decades of me working pretty much independently, always having a job, always doing something. And then going from that to being at home, I'm sure there's somebody out there that or it's like, oh, I wish that could happen. Must be. I heard that actually when I was leaving the job. Must be nice. You know, me hearing that a man allows a woman to quit her job is only something that I ever heard of. It was never really something I experienced, except for once, which didn't last long because 6 months went by and I had to get a job. Like being told no, that I can't do something or I can't buy something. And that was the situation then. And this case was a lot different. And I was not mentally prepared to decompress fully. I was not. Because from my end, it was unpacking. All of this stuff started coming to the surface that I was not ready for. And that still comes up. Like the emotional roller coaster that I have experienced over the last year and a half is insane for me. Because I think I was always so busy. I was on autopilot. For like 2.5 decades, I was on autopilot. And I didn't deal with stuff. I wasn't dealing with stuff. Because I was always so busy trying to be the provider that I put it to it's not important. What's important is the electricity bill.
Right.
The rent's got to get paid. That's more important than me boo-hooing about some stupid shit from 10 years ago. Like, it's no. And so now I had a chance to be still and to think and to feel and have this pressure taken off of me. Like, it took like a good 6 months for me to fully like
I would almost be
calm down.
I would almost be willing to say even longer than that. I mean, it took like almost up to a year before like that really sets in. And I mean, it's understandable because as you just said, I mean, it's 20 years of operating a certain way and it wasn't like we drifted into it either. Like you didn't go from like full time to part time to maybe working like no, it was you were working a full time job that was even demanding more of you. You were working 60, 70 hours a week sometimes, and that was like there was no gradual easing into the transition. It was like suddenly like slamming the brakes on the car, and now you don't have a job. And now you just have to stay home. I mean, yeah, that's I think that's a normal response. I mean, like you said, like it's a very rapid change in just how you as a person are operating. And
That first day was very awkward. Remember the very first day you left?
yes, we used
It
to
was so awkward. Like,
we used to, yeah, because we used to pretty much get up and leave at the same time of the morning. So our
yeah.
routine was we both got up, we both started getting ready, and then we both left the door at the same time, and we both hopped in our cars and made our way to work. And it was like the first day that you no longer had a job to go to, and we just both kind of like looked at each other in the doorway, and you were just like, "Have a good day, I guess."
It was so weird. I remember that really awkward energy between the both of us, like, oh, like Ricky Bobby, what do I do with my hands? Type, like, okay, bye. What am I supposed to do now? It was weird. It was very weird.
And I do I feel like it did take you quite a bit to truly settle into that. And again, I mean, if it's simply because that wasn't how you were used to operating for so long. I mean, so you went from like a complete 180-degree turnaround on how things were working in your life, like in the matter of a week. Like all of a sudden we made the decision, like you put in your notice, you finished out the last couple weeks of your job, and then all of a sudden, boom, like we were here.
How do you think, since going from that mindset of 50-50 to where you're currently at now, how do you feel like you've changed?
Um, again, and that's I think it ties into that, just that almost the very basic nature of a man to be a provider is that I've found it tricky and burdensome at times. I mean, like I said, like there was a time where things were quickly becoming like on one income, we're not going to make it. That was a very very scary and stressful, situation to be in. Um, so it's been tricky and stressful in that respect, and figuring out how to make that work on that end. However, it it also does bring that very basic provider nature of like it's very fulfilling. I feel definitely more of a fulfillment. I've 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 always been employed. I've never floated around, for years at a time with no job, or even months at a time. Like I've moved around from career to career, and from job to job like anybody else, but I've always had something lined up before making a leap.
Mhm.
So I've always worked, and yet somehow working and providing and paying the bill, like doing all of that currently, is like three times as fulfilling as it is before. Because I've had good paying jobs even before that. Hey, I'm doing pretty well for myself. I'm providing for myself. I'm doing this. Like I have extra money. I can buy these things. Like, and yet somehow it still didn't match what it feels like at the end of the day. You know, at the end of a long hard work day. What I have actually done in that day isn't just, it was, a long day. It was a long day, but it it brought home more to our household. Like it brought more, peace. Like it like I don't have to worry about you not having money to go to the grocery store and going, and picking up groceries. Like I don't have to worry about like checking the checking account and making sure that we have enough for the basic necessities of living. I don't,
I don't remember if I've ever asked you this or not, but so you had the mindset of 50-50 when we first met. Obviously, you've been in the other relationships, I've been in other relationships. Why did that change? What what drove you to change that mindset with me, I guess, versus you being in these other relationships?
you know. Initially, I think it was just because as we talked about, you were at that time, you were at a job that was demanding 60, 70 hours a week out of you. It was, they were calling you in on weekends. You were doing extra. You were staying late. Things were very stressful. It was like any other job these days, where how many positions can we squeeze out of one. Um, and that was it was adding up to you. So I think what drove that change ultimately was just seeing how unhappy that particular job was making you, and by default, that also begins to make me unhappy. So now, now you're bringing it now you're bringing it home. Like we've talked a couple times about how there would be times where you'd come home from work and like you would just be so upset and distraught and just leave me alone. I don't even want to talk right now. And you would, even in those moments, like, you would let me know, like, that this isn't about you. I just need a minute. And like, that's not to say like you were taking it out or lashing out on me, but you were coming home visibly upset and just like, hey, I just really need a minute before I can even function and have a conversation with you. Like, I'm just that, and just seeing you like that was just like, why? And so that's when I made that decision. And I remember making the offer, just kind of like on a whim, just because of how unhappy you were, and how it was starting to come home to the house. It was, it was coming home and to us, what was happening at the job. And so I, even at the time, it was almost like, hey, even if it means you go to school or you take time to look for another job, like, but I'll take the burden, you know, off of you to be able to leave that job. I remember saying, like, I've looked at it, and with what I'm making, things will be tight, but we should be able to cover the bills, just on what I'm making. And and then so we did, and then it became it like when equal to your, I guess, shift in perspective in your world around you and how you operated. Now I all of a sudden very rapidly had to operate very differently. Like,
Yeah.
I've been broke before. I've made some poor financial decisions. I've been like any guy. You buy stupid stuff. You buy, that's the joke. Like, guys with their hobbies, whether you're a car guy or a gun guy, like, you buy all these parts, you buy this new gun, and then you're like, well, that's cool, but I guess I'm eating ramen noodles until the rest of this 2 weeks until my next paycheck. And I've been there. I've done exactly that. But it wasn't as big of a deal because it was just me. So now, any financial decision making or financial shortcoming or anything, like, it's no longer just me. And it suddenly becomes so much more important. Like, and so different, and so it's so much more. I think that's what drove that stress of, like, constantly checking the bank account, constantly checking where are we at, how much am I, and like that stress is driven by, like, it's not just me, being a little short for this couple weeks. If I slip up, it's like, now this household is going under. And that's why when that company at that time cut that overtime, I've made the recommendation to people: do not rely on overtime as your income. Like, it's extra, but at any time, it can go. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, at that time, I made the decision to kind of rely on that overtime that I was making. And then when they took it away, is when that was what drove that really stressful, that stressful point of, like, now I'm underwater. And so now I've told you can quit. Now things have turned into, I'm under, we're going underwater. The ship is sinking. Like, it was very, very stressful. So that, to much like you, things weren't exactly the smoothest of transitions.
I remember you watching you stress and seeing you trying to figure that out. and for it, and I know that you would keep things from me. We've talked about this, that you'd keep things from me because then you didn't want me to worry. Because then I will go from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
I'm like, I shouldn't have quit my job. Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of it would be a stress that I would keep to myself because, I was the one that basically told you, hey, you could quit your job. And then like now, and then, it was only over the course of, it was unfortunate timing because it was only the course of a few months. Like you quit your job. And then it was only like a few months after that fact is when that was when that overtime was cut. And then I was just like, oh,
Shit.
oh no. Like again, like I've unfortunately put myself in a position where I was relying on that as part of my income. So, yeah. But I can't. So it's only been a few months after I told you you could do that, and then you did. So I can't tell you like all of a sudden, hey, like I don't know, like I guess I could have, and ultimately, if I couldn't have figured it out and figured out how to make it work like I did,
Mm.
I would have had to kind of swallow my pride and come to you then and probably say like this isn't going to work. You're going to need to find a job, but I really was looking for any other alternative because it'd be one thing to come to you and say like, hey, I need your help, I need you to, but it's not just I need your help, it's I told you to quit that job or to leave that job or that you could, however you want to word it, or however it happened. Ultimately, I was the one that made the proposal, um, and then you did, and so for only a few months later to turn around and have to be like, "Hey, so
Just joking.
this isn't actually working." Like, so yeah, I guess like that's why I kind of withheld that the reality of the situation and then the stress of it, and just kept telling myself, that some way or another it's going to work out. Some way or another I'm going to figure it out.
Did
And
you mention that you were afraid of how I would look at you or something? I think we briefly spoke about that one time. You said something about that if you had come back to me and told me or
well,
something.
you've when we had, initially actually had the conversation, when I initially stated, that maybe I was more of like a 50-50 guy, that splitting everything. Both of us, we're working, we're making our own money, whatever. When we had that conversation, I remember you even at that time saying like, that basically like that you've done it, you've worked your whole life, like you've you know that's how you have also lived, but you've also put value in more traditional roles.
Yeah.
And that's been apparent because there, when you did make the transition, now it was a little weird and whatnot, but you definitely picked up like the household duties and took that very seriously. Like this is my job, this is my contribution to the household now. You picked that up very quickly, so your value in those traditional roles still showed true. But it was in that conversation you said that you valued that traditional role. And so by offering this proposal, I'm now becoming that traditional guy that, you have expressed is how, that's what you have value in. And so then, to offer that and to, take that step up and become, that traditional male breadwinner, for you and do that for us, to only have to turn almost right around and say, I can't do it. It's not working. Yeah, that fueled that a little bit, like because I had given you that, and then so now if I have to take that away, is that going to manifest itself as some sort of vision of in your mind as well, he couldn't do it. He couldn't be that man. He couldn't be the traditional guy. You know, I'm sure we wouldn't have broken up over it, but you know, that it'd still probably almost be like a black eye type of thing. Like it, you know, it may go away, but it definitely would take time to fade like that. How that transpired, that was a concern of mine. That was, I guess, at the time, like how something I was worried about, as well as, you know, am I able to fill my gas tank tomorrow? And so now it's like, oh man, like you know, yeah, like I'm worried about, are we gonna, you know, be able to buy these groceries, and am I gonna be able to put gas in my tank? Is my wife gonna be able to still look at me like a man? You know, all of those things contributed to, you know, oh boy, what have I done?
Which ultimately, like, was the fuel behind you propelling forward and starting your own business.
Yes, and that was a very big part of it. That was, I mean, the that was the not just a driving force, that became the driving force. I had muddled the idea of stuff that I wanted to do as my own business, you know, just like anybody, I'm sure, but now I have a real reason to like make it happen, like do it. Like I have to do it now. Um so that I can supplement this lost income that I've, you know, that I've been relying on, and now we no longer have it. You know, now I no longer have your paycheck. Now I no longer have this overtime that this company had been giving me and took away from me. Like that was the driving force to all of that. Yes.
Do you do you regret it anything at all, or are you happy with where we're at?
Yes.
Big picture, anyway.
I would definitely say I'm happy. Was it super stressful? Were there times where I questioned, like, did I make the right call? Like, should I have, should I have even let you quit your job? Sure, yeah, because yeah, of course, because again, I don't think I need to keep repeating about all these things, that how stressful it was, and I think a lot of people can visualize that because they've also lived it or are currently living it. It is not a fun place to be, and but like I said, you know, that also became, you know, that stress became a driver for where I am currently, and so no, I can't say I regret it, or that I would do anything differently. I think it was, you know, you don't get to become better by living comfortably, and so I definitely put myself in that very uncomfortable position for a while that really like put me through the forge. You know, things got really hot to, but that's that's what needs to happen to come out better.
Yeah, what's the saying? Growth outside the comfort zone, or success lies over the hill of, like turmoil or whatever. I've heard so many
There,
different sayings of.
there's a few variations, yeah. You know, it's like the quote we were talking about the other day, even too. You know, about how tough times create tough men, easy time. You know, tough men create good times. Anyways, but you know, the point of that being is the tough times create tough men. Like when things are hard, things are dire, is when it really brings the best and the worst out of people. But you know, in this case, like it had to bring the best out of me to piece everything together and begin this journey, and go down this trail.
I think doing what we did, definitely. I think it was challenging for both of us for different reasons, obviously, but I think it helped us. It helped us grow as individuals and as a couple.
Yeah, the I have grown. I mean, like I said, it was just a couple couple years ago, I feel like, where we had that conversation, um, of how I viewed a relationship and the finances and stuff like that, and being like, yeah, we'll split it, we're both going to work. Like, to go from that to where we're at now is just completely opposite. And
Yeah.
so obviously some growth had to happen in there. If just that in that time span, I changed my own belief on that.
I think we spoke about a little bit of it, but it was the whole I guess caliber of a person that you're dealing with at the time as well. Because you talk about innate and like the DNA of who we are, as human beings, and as a man, I guess you're designed to be a certain way and to be driven and stuff like that. But if you're dealing with a woman that pretty much is already set up, like, what purpose are you going to serve? What
Yeah,
feel or what need are you going to fill and things like that?
yeah, and maybe maybe there was some of that going on too, subconsciously or something, of like, what do I bring to the table to this relationship that is that stands out, or is stands out to you. And yeah, like you said, like you were set up, you had a good job too, you had bought your own things, you had your own things going on. And so I guess, like, what else could I do? Like, I can't just go out and buy you nice things or whatever. Like, you were doing that for yourself. So, well, what if I can pay for this and buy you nice things, and you don't even have to work? Is really the only additional step you can take to improve what you had.
Yeah.